Hi, I'm Jenny Graham with the Tulsa World, editorials editor of the opinion section, here with.
I'm Bobby Sett, editorial writer.
And we welcome you to our latest podcast and video. This video is available on podcast. You can download and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. So I think that one of the big news that came out of last week was, again, another epic story. Reporter Andrea Eager has been covering this, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now, maybe 4, probably closer to 4 years. And it's the virtual charter school that everyone seems to have reports of mismanagement, from the OSBI to the OSBI has turned over the report to the Attorney General's office now. So we're waiting on the Attorney General to act. But Cindy Byrd, the state auditor, did a great job with a comprehensive report 2 years ago. So, I mean, Bob, what is your take on this? You know, we've talked about it a lot in editorial board. The way I have summed it up for people is we're incredibly frustrated by law enforcement and legislatures who don't want to seem to do anything. And I don't know why.
Yeah, this is, it's kind of one of those things where this drumbeat keeps going on. And we are slowly, but more loudly and persistently demanding that something be done. That's where we're at right now. And when she likens this to the worst case of, financial mismanagement, what was the words that she used?
She called it the Enron of public education. Cindy Byrd did this last week. Yeah. And she was, I think, trying to push for prosecution, that something needs to be done.
It's really, really bad when she's saying this. I mean, the allegations that are being made right now include words like embezzlement. That's rather serious. And the amount of money that we're talking about, the state is seeking to recoup, and that may have been misspent, is in the 8-figure range at this point, 7 or 8 figures.
The State Department of Ed is withholding $20 million. But what we're talking about, and that's what they're withholding from the school, problem is that's a punishment on the school, not on the people who are alleged to have committed the offenses.
Right.
And we're talking about in excess of 145 million in addition to maybe 60 million. I mean, they're astounding numbers.
It is.
And I think you had pointed out in our editorial board that this seems to be maybe a reluctance, because people are thinking, well, we can't make a big fuss about this because it'll make school choice movement look bad, which I disagree, because there are a lot of good programs out there who play by the rules. And charter education, virtual education, all those have a place. But by not bringing these people to justice, by not recouping this money and holding them accountable, I think it hurts the school choice movement.
Yeah, well, I think so too. And I think one of the things that we saw evidence of what you're talking about happened in the last legislative session. They had a chance, based on the multi-county grand jury's recommendations, to enact legislation to fix this stuff. And the House, to their credit, House members did that. And then the Senate sat on it. Why? Why did they do that? And I mean, we've seen a lot of things where people have made a point of certain lawmakers getting political donations to their campaigns. And, that could be part of it. And also could be this thing about, like you said, we talked about the potential harm of the brand of school choice. I don't care about any of that. If we've got people who are committing crimes and bilking the state of Oklahoma to the detriment of Oklahoma children's education, we got to do something about that. You can't sit on this.
Right. I think Cindy Byrd said by the inaction since her report came out, because nothing happened, they were able to pocket $80 million more dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And this would never happen in a traditional brick and mortar school. And that's the other part of it that's.
And let's be really clear about something here. One of the something that is supposedly on brand for the conservative side of politics is fiscal responsibility or fiscal conservatism or anything like that. the legislature is charged with being kind of guardians of how public money is spent, as is, as is law enforcement. We're talking about the AG's office, state auditor's office, and anyone else that's investigating this right now. I mean, can we actually have some action of being fiscally responsible here? Can we do that?
Nice.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, on the things that are, I think, going well, and I wrote about it for my column for this weekend, I was struck by a small story a few weeks ago that NSU, Northeastern State University, received a $500,000 grant from the federal government. I believe it was ARPA money, the relief money, to create a child care program at its campus for drop-in care for its students. And I thought it was brilliant. I mean, talk about a workforce need and a gap. You know, so many employers are wondering why we can't get workers. And I think, well, what is the shift? So I'm thinking of working parents. And the same goes for parents going back to school. Childcare ranks so high up there, always has, but it's one of those workforce supports that doesn't get spoken about a lot. And so I checked in with DHS to see what their licensing numbers are, because I thought they had fallen off. And it was kind of interesting that during the pandemic, most of the child care facilities, homes and centers have been afloat through relief money and just through, caregivers making it work. But if you look for the last 5 years, there's been a drop off by at least 13%. And I think if you were to go back further, it's even more. So I wrote my column this weekend just about that need of childcare in a system. And Oklahoma has a pretty good system for oversight, but I think there needs to be more talk about infrastructure for childcare as a workforce need. But sometimes I'm talking to other sometimes you're almost like another parent. Parents understand this, but sometimes when you don't have a child in care or in need, it's one of those things that's out of sight, out of mind. So
yeah.
But on the other end of things, you're writing about college debt. So we've got debt on the beginning end of things and debt on the other side of things. So what got you thinking about college debt?
So I think maybe about a month or so ago, I was talking to a friend of mine. She is kind of straddling that line between Gen Z and millennial age. So she's in her mid-20s. Just out of undergrad school, so is her husband, and in their mid-20s. Anyway, so we started talking about personal finance and stuff like that, and as the conversation started rolling along, I was like, well, here's a few things that I was, working up when I was about your age. Start talking about setting aside some money for savings, opening an IRA, paying down debt, and then I just stopped myself. Because in the back of my head, it's rattling man, it wasn't the same for them as it is for you right now. It's not even close. When I was in school, when both my wife and I got out of school, we had about 10 grand in student loans. We paid that off in about 5 years. The payments were about what you'd expect out of a car payment, right? Mm-hmm. Fast forward to today, and even go back 10 years. So we're talking about two generations here, millennials and Gen Z. Their average student loan debt is $40,000.
And that's average. They're
average.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about there is, when you're talking about the average, you're not talking about just everybody got their 4-year degree. You're talking about people who had to drop out. You're talking about people who have paid more than that. And we're not even talking about the folks that do the post-grad stuff. Mm-hmm. Some of these folks, in fact, I think somewhere around 2.5 million Americans are carrying 6 figures worth of college student debt. And, you can Dave Ramsey baby steps that stuff all you want and talk about, do this, save a little here, buy a house early, invest in real estate, Man, when you got when you have a mortgage-sized student loan hanging over your neck at age 22 or age 23 that you're still paying on when you're 40.
Oh, there are people that are in retirement that, that went back later in life and they're still paying off student debt. I mean,
that is a
they're hitting 50s
huge,
and 60s.
yeah, we're going to pay for that in the long run.
Well,
Because
the
these are
flip
people
side of
that,
though, Bob, people will argue with you, say, well, college isn't the only route. They didn't have to
sure,
take that debt out. They didn't have to go to college.
yeah, sure. So let's say
That's
they
where
do
you
something
get
else.
pushback.
If you're fortunate enough where, let's say, your dad or somebody owns a business where you work in the trades and you can just apprentice for free off of that, cool. Otherwise, you're going to trade school. You're going to trade school, you're spending $4,000 to $15,000 a year and up. Now, it'll probably be less money total than it would be otherwise, but it's still money that you're going to be paying for.
True.
The schooling that you're going to be paying for. And we still have a lot of professions that we need to make this economy run, doctors, attorneys, accountants, engineers, finance pros, bankers, stuff like that, that you have to go to college to get those things. And if you're going to try to succeed in a knowledge economy, that has to be part of the mix. So the problem is not going to just go away if we start sending more people to become, welders and mechanics and, home builders and stuff like that. It's not going to work that way. That's a simple, easy way to blow off a big problem. Doesn't hold water.
Well, what you point out is that the state government has significantly pulled back its funding of higher education.
Yes.
And I've always kind of wondered in lawmakers, it's almost, you hear lawmakers complaining about higher ed. They want more college. They want people from their towns to get more college degrees, but they're not funding it to where people can afford those college degrees.
They're making
and what
it harder.
was it? What was the difference that you found and what was the investment?
Well, this goes back to a column, information, a column that you actually wrote. When we were in college back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was about 40% was what the state was picking up the tab for higher education. And now it's less than 10%. And you add that to how much the costs have gone up. And that's why we have these astronomical bills that people are paying to go to school. And we're not just talking about Harvard, Yale, or Baylor, or some out-of-state prestige school. We're talking about Oklahoma State. It ain't cheap. And it's a lot of money that these people have to carry forward for decades in the future. And that's going to stop them from buying homes, from investing, from fully participating in the economy like all of us remember doing from an early age, and even starting families. So we have an economic model in this country that's based on people being able to do that at an early age. And now that's starting to grind down. Right. We're all going to pay for that.
Right. And, going into the session starting up pretty soon in Oklahoma, and the lawmaker is going to be making some decisions on where to spend our money. Yeah. And State of the State's Monday. We got the governor that's going to, and all governors are going to paint a rosy picture. I expect Governor Stitt to be no different, to say that we're doing great. And we are in some areas, but in a lot we're not. So, and I think as journalists, sometimes we tend to write about things. It's like, what do we need to fix? And it's not that we don't appreciate the wonderful, things that may be going right. And I was thinking about what we're kind of looking for here in the state of the state. One of the interesting things that's been going on recently is over the last so many years, the relationship between the state of Oklahoma and the tribal nations within our borders has just deteriorated. I mean, everything from the gaming compacts to the hunting compacts to, McGirt and the fear and scare that's been perpetuated by our state leaders. But in recent weeks, and I think this is because the Supreme Court finally said, no, McGirt stands, the Muskogee Nation chief, David Hill, in his state of the state to the nation, basically said it's time to start over. We're willing to cooperate and work with the state of Oklahoma, and to give a plug to an upcoming op-ed this weekend on this Sunday, the Cherokee Nation Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. wrote a piece for us saying the same thing. And I'm boiling it down pretty simple. I would encourage everyone to read it. But it's the leaders are saying, we can start over, we can cooperate, we can lead, we can have the best criminal justice system, we can have these great partnerships that make our state great. And with that, I would like to see the governor say something similar. That all of this rhetoric about and scare tactics about McGirt has proven to be complete bunk. It just has. 25,000 prisoners. McGirt affected 235, and 71% of those have already been retried. So, to me, I that's what I'm looking for. Is there anything that you are particularly going to be looking to hear coming up?
Well, I'm definitely looking to see what the governor has to say about McGirt and with the relations with the tribes. But also kind of going back into my whole fiscal theme that I'm running here. The state has been loudly trumpeting these large surpluses that we seem to be racking up in terms of state revenues. And I would look at things like our teacher shortage that is ongoing, and the skyrocketing cases of people leaving the profession, leaving to go to other states to teach, having to use emergency certs, again, going into the higher education thing, child welfare, state health issues, all of these things. At some point, we need to start investing our money back into the state. We need to show the people that we're trying to recruit to move here, to work here, to move their businesses and industries and potentially their headquarters here, that this is a place that is investing in itself to make it a better place to live and do business. The time is now. We have the money to do this. Now, we don't have to go hog wild and mortgage our future away, but I think we do need to use some of that money to put back into essential services that make the state a better place to be. Simply sinking it into an emergency fund or passing more tax cuts it's not going to do it. I'm sorry, it's just not.
Well,
so that's what
I kind of wonder how much of the relief funds that came in. I mean, it seems like some lawmakers are a little drunk on the relief funds that we've had, and we're able to do some projects that we weren't normally able to do except for this. Well, that all is going to go away. So, and we've already cut our tax. We cut the corporate and the individual tax already, and we've been promised that that'll pay off. We'll see. It's supposed to be invested back and we'll have more money. So we'll see how that pans out in a couple of years. But part of this, participating in democracy, I want to remind everyone that we have a vote on Tuesday. It's an election that never gets attention. It's mainly school bonds, some municipal things. And in Tulsa, we're voting on the PSO franchise, which editorially we support. I was a little surprised that we've had that franchise agreement since 1933. And what it basically says is PSO can use the right-of-ways and alleys, which is important during times of the storm. And the PSO pays the city fees, which is used for day-to-day operations, everything from police to fire. And our lighting is cheaper with this agreement. So our street lighting. So we back it. And we've got a lot of local boards. You mentioned last week, or no, it was in a column last week. You talked about how hard it is to be on a local school board. God bless them.
Yeah, if you're serving on a local city council or a school board or something like that, I was just thinking about this as I was at a debate with for the union school board, and 2 of the 3 candidates showed up, and I'm listening to these 2 guys. One of them's a long time professional, running in professional circles. Very highly degreed in a lot of different things, and he had served on the board before. And the other guy is a physician here in town, downtown OSU Hospital. And I'm listening to these guys, and they're smart, and they are just putting out great information and communicating really well. And I'm just thinking, but they're also doing this on their own time, on their own dime. They could be at home with their kids, they could be watching a ball game, but no, they're here. And they're willing to serve and spend many nights and many mornings and many lunches and doing whatever studying fascinating things like budgets and hiring processes and legal issues that are coming up, and all the same, probably taking a few angry phone calls and emails and stuff like that here and there for no money. But they do it. And I think that's just an impressive thing to me. And people should understand that there's a lot of sacrifices that go into running for local office and doing a job that is very important. The local government affects us more than anything in terms of government.
And particularly with school board, and I don't think people realize they do not get paid. By law, they cannot be paid. It cannot exceed $100 a month. So sometimes they'll pay like $25 per meeting. And it's not just the 2 meetings a month. They have, you have due process meetings. If a teacher or a staff member is let go, you have special meetings all the time. I think it is one of the hardest offices to hold, because at least with city council, you're getting paid not too bad. County commissioner in Tulsa, I think they're getting paid like $120,000 or more. At last I checked. Some of these other, even with the legislature, they're getting compensated. Enough, but school board and you say a few angry calls. I think they get called a lot when people are angry, because people don't think of their school board member until they're mad about something, or want something. So, I've always had a big respect for people who step up for that particular office because of all the offices out there.
Yeah, if you're on the Jenks School Board, or you're on the Sapulpa City Council or something like that, it's a lot of work, and you are paid in the satisfaction of doing a job as well as you possibly can. That's it.
Right. And the 2 main jobs of a school board member, it really boils down to it. It's you got to pass the budget that the administration brings to you, and you're involved in the hiring and evaluation of the superintendent. So those are the 2 primary jobs. The school board is not picking textbooks. They're not picking curriculum. That's sometimes that micromanaging idea kind of gives me a little pause when I hear people talk about that. But the 2 main jobs of those school board are those 2 things, and they work closely to oversee to see that. But I just encourage people to vote this weekend and or this week on Tuesday. My son is 18. It'll be the first election he'll be able to vote in. He's not nearly as excited as I am, but I will be taking him there. I'll get the sticker. I'll do the whole thing. So,
cool.
And so speaking of, you had mentioned, remember we talked a little bit about book bans last week?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of taken off. Well, I asked you if you'd ever read a book that just because it was banned, and you said, nah, you're pretty picky. And I read Catcher in the Rye, which was a horrible book. But I asked some other people, like some books that they might have read. And I got back, like 1984 was popular. The Anarchist Cookbook, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Which I don't know anything about it, but some people said that they probably would appreciate it more at age 60 than they did at 16.
Yeah.
So I may have to pick that up to see what they're talking about. A lot of Judy Blume. You're about my age. Do you remember girls sneaking around Judy Blume books?
I remember girls reading some Judy Blume.
Yeah, you had to my mom didn't care what I read. So I was the supplier of the Judy Blume books to the girls that couldn't get it. That was just, but yeah, Judy Blume was big on that. So it was just kind of funny. A lot of people, are against, but there's a Mouse was banned.
Yep.
There were, outside St. Louis, there was a school district that took 4 books off the shelf, a Toni Morrison book. Those had to do with like race and sexuality for those books. And so you had mentioned there was one in Tennessee, right?
So a couple things here. In Tennessee, there's a church out there. There's a pastor named Greg Locke, pastors or leads, and he had a book burning.
Oh, wow.
They had a book burning. They burned all the Harry Potter and Twilight and anything else that they thought was evil. Yeah, they had a book burning.
Harry Potter.
Oh. Yeah, it was very, very odd, just citing satanic influences or whatever. But you were talking about banned books and stuff like that. And so on some of those lists, um, some of those books are really, really mainstream.
I know.
You know, in some places, Lord of the Rings banned. Lord of the Rings. You know, I read that when I was a kid. You know,
It
I'm
only
not.
makes them popular. Like Mouse right now, it's the number one most like
Yeah, you can't get
purchased
it.
book on Amazon. It
Yeah,
didn't
you
even
can't
chart
get
in the
it.
top 1,000 before it was banned.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It kind of has the opposite effect. People are like, well, why do people not want me to read this? And then they find out, well, this is really pretty stupid. But yeah, we've come kind of a strange distance here lately where we've gone from uh celebrating this or celebrating that or look at this new cool book to a giant swath of book bans and curriculum scrutiny and now, you know, stacking up a bunch of pallets and a bonfire and burning Harry Potter books.
A friend of mine did.
Cool. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
a friend of mine reminded me because you know, a lot of this is coming from the conservative area. He said, but sometimes it comes from the other end of the progressive side, where there are bands that want to ban Tom Sawyer and some
Yeah.
of those outdated ones. And I agreed. I said yes, and I think that's wrong too, because even though it uses the N word and it's a horrible word, but I don't think you can ban it because we have to explain why it's a bad word. We have to see in our literature where that came from. And I think that in things like Tom Sawyer is a way to discuss that with a modern,
Yeah.
you know, modern youth. And so I agree. you know, on either end of the spectrum politically, I just feel like, you know, banning is just a bad thing. But I will say, I have not written a book yet. I know you have. If I do, I want it banned because honestly, those things sell. So if you're wanting to be a writer, write specifically to get it banned. Are you finding? There you go.
Get this book on a
No, it's a
banned
horrible
book
book.
list.
Don't read it.
Ban this book. Ban
What's it
it.
called? Outsider?
Outsider. Yes.
By Bob
Ban
Doucette?
this
No. It's a
terrible
horrible.
book.
We do not want youth reading
Get it
that.
on the list today.
It's probably got a bad word in there, so forget it. So
And yeah, it actually does have
all
a
right.
couple
So
bad words.
to end this, I'm looking at snow right now. My kids are on a snow day,
Yes.
and I miss when they were little and snow days were so fun. And they're teenagers now, and they pretty much just watched a South Park marathon and enjoyed life, made some brownies. But
That sounds pretty good.
yeah, and you know, as an adult, snow days I think are just calming. There's something about winter weather that just makes it calm. But I remember it seemed like, and maybe it's just when my memory, we had more snow days as kids, and maybe it's just global warming. But I remember snow days all the time, just on the toboggan. Do we have toboggans or are they just sleds? I don't know. Are they
Either
toboggans?
Oh, good.
I went down a hill.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do on snow days? Do you remember your snow days when you were a kid?
Well, so you got to remember that where I grew up, if it wasn't over 3 feet, you didn't get a snow day.
Yeah, that's
So,
my brother-in-law's from Syracuse, New York, and he's like,
yeah.
this isn't snow.
Yeah, we in Denver, it had to be an outright blizzard because they were really good at plowing the streets and making sure things were clear. But it did happen from time to time. So yeah, you know, we got a ton of snow. We'd do that stuff. There's this big Cherry Creek Reservoir right in the middle of town near a suburb, Cherry Hills or something like that. There's a huge earthen dam, and we would just find a sled to go down that thing. You pick up some speed, break your neck doing that, but it'd be a lot of fun.
You'd probably skied and everything else, didn't you?
Well, you know, it's funny because as a kid, we didn't ski that much. So I didn't start skiing until I was in college. But yeah, my sister was in a ski club and in high school and all that stuff. And my brother Mike skied on his own son as well. But yesterday I was out and about and I saw two guys on snowboards seeing if they could find a little route to ride down in the hills in my neighborhood. It was kind of funny.
So did you go out running yesterday? This doesn't keep you from working out?
No, I kind of like it, actually. I saw people out running, which was pretty brave. The wind chill yesterday was about 5.
Mhm.
But fun fact, all of the people I saw out running yesterday were women.
We're tough people, man.
I mean, the
Telling
dudes
you.
nowhere to be found,
Or-
although there were dudes snowboarding, but you know.
Or they have teenagers inside their house, and fighting a wind chill of 5 might have been better. I have been there where it's like, you know what? I'm out. So
my favorite thing to do
either way.
around here when we get a lot of snow is go hike at Turkey Mountain. Turkey Mountain
That would
with
be
a
nice.
big old blanket of snow on it is beautiful.
There you go.
I like that.
We still have a couple of days left. So, well, that's our weekly roundup. Check us out next week. We'll have more news, more information, and I'm sure there'll be some things that'll get us riled up. So this week was pretty good overall. So anything you want to add, Bob?
Write letters.
Yes.
Give us letters to the editor. We like them as long as they're sane.
And pitch us some op-eds. So email us, write us. It's letters@tulsaworld.com for those of you who want to just, it's easy to remember, or look up Bob and I. It's our emails are easily found. So we'd love to hear from you. So thank you. Till next week.